That part I do remember to do. And here is Michelle Hildreth, the chair of Women in Libraries Roundtable, to introduce our panelists. Take it away, Michelle.
Thank you, Laura. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy you could all join us for this panel on non-traditional career paths. Our panel has a diverse work history, and we are hoping that their experience can help you consider alternative career paths for your library science skills. Before I turn it over to our panel to introduce themselves, I just wanted to share a little bit about Women in Libraries Roundtable, which I will call WILLR for short. For those of you who are unfamiliar with us, we strive to be a forum for discussion of the concerns of women in librarianship and how they affect the profession as a whole. We aim to provide trainings and workshops in a wide variety of topics and usually sponsor author or artist visits at the biennial conference. In September 2020, we will be offering a virtual workshop on trauma-informed library services. We hope to be sending more information out about that, but please consider it as something for you to do in the fall. I believe it's going to be September 18th, and we'll send out information to the listserv at that time. Please consider joining WILLR to help us provide these programs. And lastly, the current WILLR board is interested in recruiting additional directors. If you're interested in increasing your involvement with NCLA, please reach out to me or a member of the WILLR board. Our contact information is listed on the NCLA website under our roundtable. And now I will turn it over to our first panelist, Cal Shepard. So Cal, can you please introduce yourself and include your work history and a little bit about what you are currently doing?
I would be happy to. Hi, everybody. My name is Cal Shepard. My work history is mostly in North Carolina. I started out as a children's librarian at the Nantahala Regional Library. Anybody know where that is? It's out in Murphy, and that's a long, long way from Raleigh. So I worked there as a children's librarian, and Asheville was a big city back then. Then I moved to the Forsyth County Public Library in Winston-Salem, where I was also a children's librarian. Had 3 different jobs there, and then jumped from there to the State Library, where I was the youth services consultant. There was some dramatic turnover at the State Library at that time, so I then moved up to be the chief of the Library Development Section, which is the section that most people think of when you think of the State Library. That's continuing education, the youth services consultant, etc. So I was happily doing that when I made my veer off the traditional library path and moved down to SOLANET, the Southeastern Library Network. It's now Lyrasis, but back then it was SOLANET, and that was located in Atlanta. So in that role, I ran the continuing education department, which entailed hiring and keeping trainers on staff, having some administrative staff handle registration for all the workshops that SOLANET offered across 10 states, and doing training myself and using contract trainers. So I met a lot of people that way. And then I was still doing that, and we decided SOLANET wanted to expand its consulting arm. There were a lot of changes going on in the library field at that time, with OCLC in particular, withdrawing support for the networks. So I jumped at that chance and brought up the consulting arm. We were doing it kind of on the fly. This was much more planned and intentional, developing a consulting section. So I was happily doing that when the state librarian of North Carolina, Mary Boone, retired. So I jumped at the chance to come back to North Carolina because I really, really missed it. I'm a North Carolinian at heart. So I ended my career at the state library as the state librarian, and that was very fun. And I think it was probably better equipped to do that, having had this sort of side gig that I had. So I just also wanted to add one more thing, which is that preparing for this session and just thinking about, the change that I made, why I did it, how I did it, and all that, that has been really a fascinating journey for me, and kind of a revelation to sort of go back and think, how did I do this? Why did I do this? All of those questions. So I'll get into that a little more in my next, the next time I talk, but that's the bare bones outline. And I'm so thrilled to be included. So thanks, Willer, for including me. I'm going to mute myself now.
Thank you, Cal. That was a great introduction. We are happy to have you back with North Carolina today. So next I'm going to ask Elizabeth Karen the same to introduce herself and include a little bit of her history and then a little bit about what she's currently doing now.
Great, thank you. I am also very honored to be included and super happy to be back in the NCLA world for a minute because I have been out of it for a minute. So thank you for inviting me. I actually started, I got my BA in secondary English education from UNC and decided pretty much halfway through that process that I didn't really want to teach high school. I moved back home to where I grew up, which was in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I actually became a medical transcriptionist of all things, but stumbled into and while I was at UNC, I did work at Davis Drive as a student assistant in the collection development department, and I really, Davis Drive, I live in Cary, can you tell? Davis Library, and so I really sort of caught the library bug, but decided not to pursue that right then. And that's just sort of the foreshadowing part of this story. So then I did take a medical transcriptionist job, and then I landed a job at the Education Center, which is a publishing company for teachers. If anybody works with elementary school teachers, you've probably heard of their magazines. The Mailbox Learning are two of their main publications. And it was an admin position, it was an admin assistant, but they had this library that it was basically sort of a dream situation where there were thousands, tens of thousands of children's books, all free because it was a publishing company that recommended books. So the collection development budget was zero, but you still had this great collection. It needed to be cataloged, and I apologize that my dog has chosen this moment to start barking. Welcome to working from home. Hopefully that will stop in a moment. So we basically, I served to organize that information and get it to the editors who needed to write articles and recommend books to go with lesson plans. That was an amazing opportunity to basically work in a special library that was also a children's library, but didn't have any children. So I actually started my library career kind of non-traditional, and I really liked it that way. I decided to get my MLIS from UNCG while I was doing that job, and it was supplemented by the Education Center, so thank you for that. Every A with a little money back in my pocket. So then I met some guy and decided to move to Raleigh to marry him, and in that move decided I didn't want to commute to Greensboro anymore to work at the Education Center, even though I really loved that job, and discovered that Dialogue was headquartered in Cary. So I actually worked for Dialogue for 4 years. I loved Dialogue. I loved databases. I loved how old and ridiculous it was. Sort of still is. I loved the challenge of that. And I also kind of liked the job security. And I was working in basically in a call center to support special librarians using Dialogue, so legal librarians and science librarians, on how to do everything from dial in on Telnet. And I'm old, but I'm not that old. It's just the Dialogue, that's how they did things, to actually searching the databases and setting up alerts and things like that. Loved working there, but got pregnant, as one happens to do, and decided I didn't want to work in a corporate environment anymore. And so I just sort of cast my eye to public libraries. And all along, I sort of said I never really wanted to work in public libraries. And that's actually where I ended up. So I spent 8 years with Wake County Public Libraries in reader services. In adult services at first, and then the last part of that time, that's my husband. Welcome to working from home, people. And then and then I went on to manage West Regional Library in the Wake County system. So in 2012, a whole bunch of things sort of happened all at once. Wake County was reorganizing, and although it was really good reorganization, it sort of left me in a position where I was no longer doing the thing. I got to discover actually what I really love doing, which is actually managing people and working with people. And even though I was managing this big library, I was no longer doing that. I was really managing the facility, and anyone who can see my house knows that that's not my strength. So I just decided it was time to maybe move on to something that I'd always wanted to do. And I decided to open a travel agency, which sounds really random. But when you think about it, I went from one obsolete job, why do we need libraries when we have Google, to another obsolete job, why do we have travel agents when we have Google? So I still fight that fight today, but I use a lot of my skills, and we'll talk about that later. I own Outlander Travel. You may notice that that ties into my reader services background. If you've heard of Outlander, you know where that comes from. So it's a little nod to my past. While moving to the future, I have 11 independent contractor agents and 1 employee who is a part-time assistant. We've grown a lot in 8 years. Right now, we're not growing at all. Unfortunately, due to this situation, my business has come to a complete halt, but it's given me a great chance to regroup. So that is where I am today. Thanks again for having me.
Or something. I don't know why this isn't.
That was great. Elizabeth, you've had an interesting career so far. And now I'm going to call on Heather, Heather Greer Klein, and ask her the same. If she could please introduce herself and include a little bit of her work history so we can hear what she's doing.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Greer Klein. I started my library career as a community college librarian, but I was only a community college librarian for a year, and I moved and I did some contract work in that time. And then I got a job as a member services coordinator at NC Live, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So I worked on the help desk at NC Live, and I did training, and I got to travel all over the state and work with all y'all wonderful people, and learned a ton. I learned a ton in that consortial role about project management, technology management, and really about services for libraries, all kinds of libraries. So that was, and NC Live is based at NC State University, but I'd say my day-to-day work didn't really look like traditional library work. So I was in that role for 6 years, and then I moved in 2016 to a role at a very small international nonprofit membership organization called DuraSpace. At DuraSpace, we were 11 people, completely virtual. I had colleagues in 5 time zones, and I was a services coordinator. So this nonprofit had was sort of the home of some open source software in the digital preservation and repository world. And they offered these services to keep open source options in place for smaller organizations, libraries, but also I started working with archives and museums. So in the 2 years that I was at DuraSpace in that role, were pretty incredible. When you're in a place with just 11 people, you learn to do all different kinds of things. So I was running the services and helping people decide what kind of repository they needed, but I was also worked on the largest IMLS grant ever. I learned how to run a pilot project. I really got to pretty much anything I wanted to help with, I was able to jump in. So that was really excellent. One of the downsides of working with a membership organization in the cultural heritage space with only 11 people is that it's a challenging time, even pre-COVID financially in that world. And our board decided that to keep us strong, we really should probably merge with another organization. So my organization merged with Lyrasis, which is a very large, I'd say they're really also sort of a large membership organization as well. And so my role now at Lyrasis is similar. I'm still doing some of the same things I did at DuraSpace, but my title is Outreach and Engagement Coordinator for Digital Technology Services, which is a mouthful. And another role that I'm taking on is the release manager for DSpace 7. So I'm working with a group of international software developers, and I'm sort of their project manager, trying to help them get this piece of open source software that they're all contributing to as volunteers, trying to get it out a little bit faster. So I'm learning a completely different thing there.
Great, thank you, Heather. And last, I'm going to call on Kate Hill and have her also introduce herself and share her work history.
Thanks so much. So, yeah, as I said, my name's Kate. So I actually started off working in libraries in AmeriCorps. So I was at a school library first, and then I went to a public library and worked at the Homework Center and ran their job center and computer classes. So I actually did both of those. And then I decided I loved those so much. Like that was my test case if I liked libraries, and I decided that I did. So I decided to get my MLS I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I'm not a North Carolinian by nature. I've lived here for about 8 years, but originally from Wisconsin and Minnesota. And then in library school, and then right after library school, I ended up getting one of the library fellows positions at North Carolina State University. So that's kind of how I made my move to North Carolina. Pretty traditional, well, huge academic library, which was like a 2-year fellowship in which I got to explore the world of academic libraries, worked in both user experience and electronic resources management there. And I kind of fell in love with e-resource management. After that position ended, I ended up working at a special library. So I've kind of worked across all types of libraries. I ended up working at the Highway Safety Research Center at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and ran that library it was a one-person solo library shop. I kind of thought, oh, I want to see what it's like to do everything. Realized that it was a lot to do everything. And decided to get back to my first passion, which was e-resources. And then for the majority of the time, I was for 5.5 years at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro as their electronic resources management librarian. So that is where I spent the majority of my career. Of course, that sounds very traditional, and that's because it was. It was an academic traditional library. I, did e-resources stuff, acquisitions, collection development, worked a lot with publishers and vendors, licensing, that whole tech world side. And I really fell in love with the idea of the publishing workflow and kind of the chance of getting what I really fell in love with was like user resources and user discovery and discovery systems in general, how to make materials more discoverable, more usable, more accessible. And so I actually I'm now in a non-traditional library space. I moved so I'm the newest of the non-traditional librarian folks. I've been only at my job for 4 months, but I am at EBSCO as a library services engineer for the Southeast and Midwest region. And so I can talk a little bit about what that is like and what the heck that means. A library service engineer, so my job is I was supposed to be 30% travel and actually kind of a field consultant, technical consultant for people who in the Southeast and Midwest are doing anything with software as a service. So anything with EBSCO Discovery Service, Open Athens, which is their authentication. Folio is something that I've been working heavily with, which is their new open source ILS. So I was supposed to be going out in the field, communicating with people both in what's called a pre-sale context. So before people have purchased it, to ask any technical questions, make sure all specifications are there, help them set up the back end, make sure it's customized to the level they need. Basically, our role is to be the technical and librarian expert alongside sales. So sales might not have that specialty or level of knowledge about librarianship, and then the library service engineers there are 5 of us, are all people who have MLSs, all people who have worked for multiple years in libraries, and we bring that knowledge and understanding of librarianship, and also we are there to communicate, kind of be the intermediary. If like the sales and librarians can't understand each other, we're kind of the translators between corporate and librarianship and trying to make them kind of mesh and where they are. So that is what I do. Currently, I am not in the field. I started the job literally end of February, so I have never been in the field. I'm excited to when that one day may happen, but we are still doing the same thing via things like WebEx, and also doing a lot of work with customization and development of new like API connections. It's very tech, back-end tech heavy, working with libraries one-on-one to kind of figure out how they can best set up their discovery services and open and their other software as a services to fit their customer needs, and often develop new tools for them. So that is me and what I'm doing.
All right, thank you, Kate. Okay, so I'm going to go into some questions that we had prepared, and after these questions, we'll have an opportunity to take questions from the chat or from the audience. So if you do have questions that come up through this time, please do throw them into the chat. We have somebody looking at that as well. So the first question is, how does your degree or library experience help you in your current work? And what are the most interesting and rewarding aspects of your current job? And I'm going to turn that over to Cal first.
Well, I'm retired, so but I'm still doing stuff, believe it or not. So I just want to, I hate to say this, but library school wasn't that much help. It gave me the credentials I needed to get a job. But then when I landed in Murphy, it was so far away and there wasn't a lot of support for continuing education or doing training or going anywhere. So one of the first things I did was I went to an NCLA conference in Charlotte. And it was a big adventure for me. And I was doing it on the cheap. So I stayed with the boss's daughter who happened to live in Charlotte, who I barely knew. But I started meeting people. And so I never missed another NCLA. My dime, their dime, I was always there. The first time I ever made a presentation in front of adults was an NCLA conference program that I just thought up and tossed out there and said, why not? So when I did get out of the hinterlands, every time I went anywhere, I would see all these people from Forsyth County Public Library. And I'm like, boy, you must be gigantic or something. Bill Roberts was the director at the time, and he was a huge supporter of continuing education for everybody on staff. So I decided that's where I wanted to go work. It took me 2 years for a job to come up so that I could apply for it, but I did, and I got hired. And then Winston's kind of right in the middle of things, so I got very much more involved. And so I think my library experience, which was much more useful to me in moving forward and around. So when I got to this, I was actually the state librarian. I met him, it was Howard McGinn. And when the job came open, he sort of approached me and said, why don't you apply for this job? Which is really the best possible way to get a job. So I said, well, okay, I thought I could do youth services because, you know, I'd been doing it. But then I got some training, and the next thing I know, Solinet needs somebody to run their training department. Never even occurred to me to apply for that job. Once again, they approached me and said, why don't you apply for this job? And I swear to God, y'all, I said, I can't do that. And they said, yes, you can. We'll talk you through it. And so I said, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I'm doing training for Solonet, and I'm hiring a lot of different trainers. And that's how I came to know Maureen Sullivan, who probably you all have heard about. And so Maureen would come and do projects with us and do training for Solonet. And one day out of the blue, she called up and she goes, oh, I've got a big problem. I'm supposed to do this consulting job. It's in the Southeast. I can't do it. I need you to do this for me. And you know what I said? I can't do that. And she said, I'll talk you through it. It's not that hard, really. So she did. I was nervous as a tick, but I went out there and I did it. And I thought, man, this is so much fun, because training is, it's sort of one way. I mean, you know, you usually have a fairly standard day. Consulting, oh, forget it. It's all up in, I mean, you go in with a really good idea, but anything can happen. And I have had that happen. I went into a job and it was obvious that what we had planned was nothing at all that they needed. And so about an hour into it, I just had to put my notes aside and say, well, this isn't working. What are we going to do now? So that thinking on the fly. So in terms of the experience that helps me, it's getting to know people, learning from them, learning constantly all the time any way I can, and just being open, which I wasn't, but I'm encouraging you all to be open. That's it.
Thank you. Heather, I was going to ask you that same question. How does your degree or library experience help you in your current work? And what are the most interesting and rewarding aspects of your current job?
Sure. So much like Cal, I think my library degree was the credential I needed to start learning everything on the job. I will say in my current position, because I sort of moved sideways into a world, digital preservation, that I wasn't currently familiar with, some of the things that I learned in library school were really helpful, because I at least could speak the language. I'd taken a preservation course. You know, I knew a little bit. I'd had cohort members in library school who were in the archives program, so I was a little bit familiar with archivists. So that ended up being helpful. But I think my current position skill-wise, it could be done by someone with a different kind of cultural heritage experience. So like someone with an archives background or a museum background, or even someone who'd worked for a commercial service provider. But I think what my library experience helps with is really helps me to understand the culture of different libraries and the kind of pressure that library staff can be under. I learned so much from our libraries across the state when I was at NC Live. It really serves me well now, just having that understanding, knowing also how much folks learn on the job. And then if you haven't come across something before, if, for example, your library is just starting to realize that digital preservation is something you need to do, I have a lot of empathy for having to just sort of learn that from scratch. So I have a lot of flexibility in how I do my job. That's one of the things I really, really love about my position now. And my approach involves a lot of conversation and consultation, because I know that there's a really steep learning curve if you're starting up digital preservation or repositories for the first time. So for example, the other day I was helping a solo librarian set up a repository, and she was trying to take kind of a complicated approach, but I know what kind of pressure solo librarians are under. So I asked her a little bit about her workload and then suggested she take a different path that would get things done much more quickly and be a little bit less work. So I think that empathy really helps me be a lot more effective. You know, the other part of the question, Michelle, is how I.
It's what are the most interesting and rewarding aspects of your current job?
Yes, so interesting and rewarding. I get to work with people and talk to people in different kinds of organizations around the world. Before COVID, I got to travel a lot. I've worked remotely since 2016, which I absolutely love. And I get to learn a lot about new technologies and get to have a sort of macro awareness of the technologies that libraries rely on around the world, and about some of the different concerns that folks have in Europe versus the US versus Canada. It's been just really fascinating. I constantly get to learn in this job, and I constantly get to look to do something new. So starting to do this project developer management work, which I never thought was something I'd be doing, sort of, helping folks who all speak, English as their fifth language work together to make software happen. So that's pretty cool.
Sounds pretty cool. Did any of the other panelists want to add something to that before I go to another question? All right. So next question is, what motivated you to choose an alternative career? And I'm going to start with Elizabeth on that one.
So I probably just like to do something different anyway. It's a natural tendency for me to take a skill and turn it. Curiosity, I guess. There was sort of a perfect storm that happened. First of all, I've wanted to be a travel agent ever since I was like 8 years old. It was like that fireman job, like what do you want to do when you grow up? And I always looked at it every time I changed jobs, which I've already mentioned, I did a few times. And I could never justify it. I was either not going to be using my degree, which turns out to be a total lie. It wasn't paying as much as I wanted to make, which I'm not sure librarianship ever really did either. Or something else was getting in the way of doing that job. So I just decided, I always decided to go back to libraries. So as I was now managing one of the busiest public libraries in the state, and I was not happy with the role itself. Again, the library was great, the system was great, the people were great, everything was great about it, but that job wasn't what I wanted to do, and I really didn't see where I did want to go within the system. So again, my brain starts going, remember how you wanted to be a travel agent? Maybe we should look at that again. And I happened to take a trip to Hong Kong to visit my sister who was living there at the time. And we stood on top of the Great Wall of China, which is not in Hong Kong, but we went to mainland China for a few days, just so you know that I actually have some job qualifications. And standing on this wall that literally, we actually hired a private guide who took us to private land, and we stood on a part of the wall. We hiked 2 miles of it that had not been touched in about 600 years. So it was falling apart. There were parts where you were literally climbing hand over foot. And I was just amazed at this sort of thing that had been left by people, this thing that had been created that's just unthinkable. And I was like, I keep telling myself that I can't start a business, I can't be a travel agent. Why do I keep telling myself that? And I came home, and my husband got a raise, and I said, I'm going to do it. I mean, it was just one of those perfect storm kind of things. 2 weeks later, the New York Times published an article about the comeback of the travel agent. So I think, there's a lot of times where you just have to follow your passion. And I was also of an age where, as women, we finally say, don't care anymore, I'm going to do it. And I had just hit that age. So I think that I had just gotten to the, I'm going to do what I want place in my heart, and it was time. So that's sort of a kind of a metaphysical reason to move, I guess, but I really, it was time, and eventually all those things fall into place. And building on the question of how those skills fall into place, eventually, I do wish I'd taken maybe a business class when I was in undergrad. That I do regret that, but my library admin class has helped. I mean, it definitely did. And so building on all those skills over all the years, and then the most important thing, which Cal mentioned, networking. Everything I do now ties back. The whole reason I'm here still is because I still love the people that I was with in the libraries, and that's how I end up back. So you never leave those things behind. You just take them with you. So hopefully that answers the question, maybe a little more than you wanted.
No, that was great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask Kate, as our newest alternative career person, what motivated you to choose an alternative career from your very traditional path?
Yeah, so I was also just kind of like Cal. I wasn't looking for a job. When I got this job, I was asked to apply. And it was because of a networking thing at Charleston Conference in South Carolina. So again, it's all about that networking. But reason I was asked to apply, and I thought a lot about it, and I was like, is this where I want to go? But I decided to do it for a few reasons. One of my favorite things about my past jobs was, and working in libraries in general, was getting to know different libraries, getting to know different librarians, getting to know different vendors, creating those relationships. I did, North Carolina Leadership Library, NCLA's Leadership Institute. That was one of the best things I'd done because of all those, getting to know all of those different libraries and librarians. And I really this job gave me such a great opportunity to work with libraries and see libraries and connect and make relationships with librarians across, as I said, my territories are the Southeast and Midwest. So, everything from a Wisconsin Indian Head College, where I've been helping out, which is like a tiny community college in Superior, Wisconsin, to Auburn University in Alabama and Georgia. So it's getting to do that kind of work and build those relationships is a wonderful thing and makes me excited. I also, as I said, I'm a huge discovery dork and user experience dork. And so getting to do this kind of work, at UNCG, I could help UNCG's discovery service. I could help one libraries, but here I can help so many different libraries and to improve their discovery and think about it in a different way and think about and kind of preach the importance of discoverability. I'm really fortunate at EBSCO. I don't LSEs. We don't actually get commission. We're salary, so we don't have to worry about our sales quota, which is the best because I could never do sales. But I can be talking to preaching discovery and helping people where they are get stuff to their patrons across a lot of different libraries and help so many people. So that is another reason. The final is I got to, in EBSCO, it's a huge company, so you think you wouldn't have that much of a chance to explore, but I really felt like I could unpigeonhole myself. I was feeling a bit pigeonholed, and I felt in this new position, like Heather was talking about, I am constantly having to learn new technology. I am constantly having to develop new skills and keep on top of things. And I've been given a huge amount of, I didn't think I could do it, but they've given me a huge amount of trust of no, we believe you can learn how to program, and we want to give you the time to develop these coding skills, to develop these different skills, to improve your work and your ability to work with customers. So I think that ability to kind of expand into a different world of technology, which is where I'd wanted to go, but felt like I really couldn't, was a really valuable thing about moving into this different path.
Thank you, Kate. So I got the next question here. What are the 3 skills you developed that were most helpful in your transition outside of traditional library roles? And that one goes to Cal first. You need me to repeat it?
No.
Okay.
I'm prepared.
Okay, good.
I think, well, the skill, I think they've all been mentioned. So I think the constant learning, the constant wanting to learn new things. For me personally, I sometimes am afraid that's due to a short attention span, because I've never been in any one job more than about 6 years. I've been at institutions for more time than that, but after a little while, I start just kind of looking around, So that's one thing, that if you're constantly refreshing your skills, then people are more likely to come up to you like they came up to Kate and say, hey, why don't you come work for us? Relationship building has been a big part of it for me as well. I have learned more from vendors than I ever imagined. And there's nothing, at Solonet, we would go and be in meetings in the exhibit hall, and you can't imagine the conversations that go on in there. It's just incredible. So I've learned a lot from other people. What else? Oh, the willingness to try new things, even if it was sort of thrust upon me. Sure, you can do this. When I'm doubting myself, and other people, because you work with them, they get to know you, they see what kind of work you do, and that's when they come and say, you can do this. Yeah, you can do this. So that's been the most useful to me. Short but sweet.
No, that was great. Thank you. And it does tie into everything we've talked about. And Kate, I also was going to give that question to you. So what are 3 skills that you feel helped you develop in this transition outside of the traditional library roles?
So I think that, as I said, I was an e-resources librarian, and so a huge amount of my work was troubleshooting. And also I did a lot of work with reference. And I think that that has been a huge thing that I've brought into, as I said, I'm working in a bit more of a technical back-end role, and the ability to troubleshoot problems in a kind of reference interview style. That reference interview has actually been incredibly important, because you learn how to ask important questions, to not make assumptions, that you know what is going on, that you learn how to quickly understand things, that you look up things on the back end while you're like trying to understand the issue, because it's a thing you've never heard of before, but you need to pretend that you know what they're talking about. And then also you don't jump on an answer, but listen and probe first. And so that kind of, like when I've been working with libraries, consulting, all of this kind of stuff, having those skills has been really valuable, to really get to the core and root of the problem, and not just jump into it. I also think that I'm going to say the networking, just like Cal said, and relationship building has been incredibly important. My work is all about developing relationships and camaraderie and rapport quickly, with a lot of different libraries, so they trust that I actually know what I'm talking about and can help them. So that's been a huge thing. And then I think tying into that, actually in my role, is people, when I talk to a lot of librarians, things like that, they're used to be talking to sales who might not have the library background. And so what has been really important in my conversations, and I think Heather mentioned a bit earlier, was the understanding of library culture and the understanding of library systems. So being able to basically understand what librarians and are going through, the challenges, the politics, the constraints. What is it like to set up a new system? What is it like to do a migration? What is it like to have a budget cut? Things like that, that creates a huge amount of empathy and means that I can work with libraries in a way that they feel heard. And that's kind of the most important thing that I can bring. I know the struggles basically that librarians have, and I can bring that knowledge to bear on when we're trying to help them with a problem that they're having.
Thank you. Okay, this is the last question I have. For those considering a move away from libraries to a different career path, what recommendations or advice do you have for that transition? And I was going to have Elizabeth answer that first.
So first, listen to that little voice that's telling you what you're really passionate about, and let that lead the way more than you want to. I think that we all deal with imposter syndrome. We all wonder if we can do it. And I know when I sat in front of my team at the library and told them I was going to do this, they were sad I was leaving. They were happy for me. And there were a few that were like, "You've never done that before. How are you going to do that?" And I loved them for that, because they were worried. You know, you're taking this big leap, and but it's very quick that you realize that when you're going down a path that your passion is leading you, you're going to keep that library passion with you because you had it. That's why you came here, and you're going to learn things like the Maryland model basically is the meaning of life. Like you can succeed in almost any job using that, and I use it every day. I went from I'd like a good book to read, what do you suggest, to I'd like to take a trip to a nice warm place. And you get the, I know the cover was blue and I want there to be palm trees. It's like, this is not helpful information you're giving me right now, but we'll get to the helpful information. You know, we will get there because palm trees grow all over the world. So we kind of need to narrow it down. Those skills, that ability to listen, the ability to relate to people, and to understand that what someone else needs is not necessarily what you need, is super important. And that even comes down to the, I'm ready to change jobs, but what's my team going to do? You know, how's my family going to handle it? At some point, you have that conversation and you realize that their needs are different than your needs, and the way to make things work is for you both, or you all, to move toward your end goal. So always listen to that voice and never burn the bridges behind you, because you think, oh, I left libraries. I could have said, bye-bye, I left you. I don't want anything to do with you. And instead, most of my first clients came from my friends in libraries who either wanted to travel, or they sent me people that they knew wanted to travel, knowing that I'd never done this before. So building that trust was really essential to my success. And that comes from wherever you go into whatever you do.
Thank you. That was a good answer. All right, Heather, you'll be the second one to answer that. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I thought a lot about this one.
Okay.
And so this is my advice. So really know what you like and what you want, not just what you're good at, what you're good at that you actually enjoy doing. Really think about that, so that if something that seems really different at first matches those things, you will recognize it when it comes along. So I knew after I'd had my time at NC Live, I wanted to consult with people. I knew I was good at that. I wanted to learn to manage technology projects. I wanted to have sort of a high level view, and I wanted to train and present, but I also wanted to work remotely and I wanted to travel. So reflect on those things, and then also think about how much of a risk you're willing to take, because oftentimes it can feel really risky, or actually be a little risky. That's a privileged position to be in, I totally recognize. But if you are in a position where you can try something out, it can work out really well. So for example, when I took that position at DuraSpace, it was a contractor position to start. But it was absolutely incredible. The people were absolutely incredible. They let me do all kinds of things, and they were pretty upfront that they would turn it into a real position as soon as they could, and that's what happened. So sort of sometimes worth thinking about that if you're in a position to do it. Also, one thing you might notice from all of us on the panel is being outside of a traditional library, you can still be in the wider library ecosystem. So think about the whole library ecosystem. Think about the organizations that you interact with or that you admire. So commercial service providers or consortia or library nonprofits, even education or higher ed or community nonprofits who work with your library. See if you can find old job postings from those organizations and think about how you would map your skills onto those sorts of positions. And yeah, and just sort of go through your resume and think how you would explain your biggest skills to someone who didn't know any library jargon. I think that can also be really helpful. So that'll sort of prepare you. A lot of this, I think, is synchronicity. So we've talked about, you know, networking and all of these things, and sometimes it's just, you know, a job is available when you're ready to try to take it, and you end up being the one who can get it. So you just kind of have to be ready for that.
Thank you, guys. I think that was also a great response. So I want to thank you all for being part of this panel. And I was going to see if there were any questions from the audience.
So I think the only one that we've seen pop in the chat so far, and two panelists have answered it already, but just in case anybody else wanted to speak to this, Elise from Cabarrus County asked, how often did you apply for something you didn't feel qualified for?
I can say that because I was going to type and then was like, oh no, I have to talk soon, so I didn't. I have never, maybe this is just me and my anxiety, but I have literally never applied for a job that I have felt qualified for. And
Same.
when they asked me to apply for EBSCO, I was shocked because I did not think that that was a position that I was qualified for in terms of the technology levels, technical skill levels required, but they seemed to think it was. And they believed in me more than I believed in myself. And when I've been trying to apply to jobs, even the UNCG e-resources job or the library fellows, I did not believe I was worth either of those jobs. And it basically took like my friends and my husband like yelling at me and being like, yes, you are, in order to apply for them. So every single job, I've never felt qualified for a single job I've ever been applied for.
Thank you. You know what I would say from what I've heard from all of you is that you've had a lot of bravery and just taking next steps. And so I think knowing that like sometimes you just have to step out and try something, even if you're not comfortable with it, will lead you into the direction you need to go. So thank you all for sharing your experiences with us today. And I know we do have to kind of leave the room so that another session can start. But thank you guys again.
Yes, our time is up. Thank you guys so much. If you want to, you know, contact any of these fine ladies, I'm sure they can, we can find a way to get hold of them. But I want to remind everybody that we have 3 great discussion sessions coming up at the top of the hour. The one in this room is COVID-19 in libraries. Room B is for library students and recent graduates. And room C is for public librarians discussion. And please join us for one of those great discussions. I'll see most of my peeps in room C. Anyway, but thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, Michelle and Kate. And this has been a great session. I'm sorry we had to cut it short, but have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.